Good afternoon, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us again today at our press conference. We have with me today, it's the leader, Kamraj Ramchatan, Vice Chairman, Raphael, Vice Chairperson, Kathy Hughes, myself, and Executive Member Sherrod Duncan. The order of proceedings today would be Kamraj will be making a statement first, which I will follow, then Kathy Hughes. And after that, we open ourselves to questions on the statement and any other matter, relevant matters. So Kamraj, can you proceed?
Thank you, David, and thank you, reporters that have turned up to this virtual press conference. The Alliance for Change calls attention to the continuing disregard of democracy, good governance, and social cohesion, as witnessed by the ongoing wanton dismissals of capable and qualified Guyanese, who are obviously being dismissed because of their ethnicity and perceived party affiliation. The unconscionable and unlawful detention of Haitians, reminiscent of actions at the US-Mexico border, is a frightening reality that justice in Guyana is about the color of your skin and the texture of your hair. The subsequent release of those Haitians is a vindication that the allegations of criminal conduct by the Attorney General were all fabricated and false. Compensation must be sought and awarded by the court as a formal restitution for their unlawful incarceration. The admission that Ms. Waldron was a dual citizen at the time of being named a minister and MP, in blatant disregard for the Constitution of Guyana, are frightening signs to say the least, and tell us that we are now in a full-blown autocracy that is using its one-seat majority to do whatever it wants. This PPP regime is operating under a mistaken belief that the Western powers are enamored by them and therefore willing to turn a blind eye to the daily atrocities and violations, and that one seat is equivalent to 100% of the votes. Where are the hypocritical champions of democracy here and elsewhere? They have now been unmasked as being more interested only in accessing and controlling the oil wealth, and some can add the fish wealth, than in seeing justice and democracy in Guyana. We expect to see the government and parliament address this situation with proof that the minister was sworn in again, and most importantly, that she pays financial penalties, which are under our Constitution in Article 58(1). I think this is the range, it's in the range of $200,000. The principle must be upheld. These are characteristics and instances of blatant disregard and disdain being shown to the Constitution, the people, and tenets of good governance. In relation to the trawler licenses issue, I, as Shadow Minister of Agriculture, have filed 4 questions to the clerk for the Minister of Agriculture, Zulfikar Mustafa, to answer. And that was filed on the 7th of December 2020. These are the 4 questions to the minister. 1, to whom were the 2 new trawler licenses issued to for the years 2020 to 21 by the Ministry of Agriculture Fisheries Department? 2, were there any due diligence conducted on these licensees to verify a meritorious grant thereof? 3, if there were any such due diligence done, could the Honorable Minister provide copies to this Honorable House of the said due diligence report? 4, was the Guyana Association of Trawler Owners and Seafood Processors Association, GATOS, consulted in any way prior to this grant of the 2 trawler licenses. Those were the 4 questions asked, and I understand the clerk has given them the qualification route. So they will have to be answered within a 21 days period by Mr. Zulfikar Mustafa. Those are the statements I wish to make this morning, and I hand it over back to David Patterson, our GS.
Thank you very much, Kemraj. On the local government front, the Alliance for Change continues to be disturbed by the PPP's program of establishing interim management committees across the country and funneling funds to region through this mechanism and not through the legal RDC or NDC structures, which reflects the will of our people who, the last local government election, chose their representatives. The foundation of the democracy we like to talk about. The PPP's non-convening of the RDC Council of Region 8, Pataro Siperuni, because of the known reality that they will not control the region, is a shameful disregard of the rights of the people of Region 8 to have their elected officials decide over their affairs. In the Parliament, the Alliance for Change continues to note the great travesty on the fundamental principle of any democracy, and that is the functioning of Parliament. The refusal of the PPP and their handpicked speaker to convene the committees of the National Assembly is now an obscenity that stinks to the high heavens. In the case of the absence of parliamentary committees, attention is drawn to the fact that 3 of our CARICOM brothers and sisters have had elections after August the 2nd, namely Trinidad and Tobago, Jamaica, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And it is not surprising to know that all 3 have convened the full parliaments and all committees, all of which have met and continue to meet. In the case of Guyana, the failure of the regime and the speaker to convene these committees after 4 months for the necessary oversight as prescribed by the laws and the Constitution is an outrage. COVID cannot be used as an excuse because on a daily basis, the Parliament office is arranging participation in different international fora by Zoom. Yesterday's handing over of the Auditor General's report was a charade of the worst order, as there is no public account committee in place to peruse that report. The Speaker's plea for patience is a disservice to the Parliament. His claim that logistical challenges are hampering the convening of the PSC and committees is quite frankly a joke. It is even more worrisome when one notes that the Speaker has the parliamentary staff engaged in hosting several Christmas parties and fireworks activities rather than concentrating on the hosting of committee meetings. The Alliance for Change is left with no choice now but pursue legal actions to compel the convening of the Region 8 RDC meeting and the parliamentary committees. Thank you. Kachi?
Thank you, and good morning to everyone. The AFC pledges support to City Council and calls in government to do the same. The Alliance for Change extends congratulations to Pandit Ubraj Narain and Alfred Mentor in their re-election to the offices of Mayor and Deputy Mayor of the City of Georgetown, respectively, and pledges to continue its full support to the Georgetown Mayor and City Council. The AFC notes the many challenges facing the Georgetown MNCC, not least amongst which is coping with the COVID-19 pandemic. This pandemic has added to the financial burden on an already indebted and cash-strapped City Council. It has placed the added burden of ensuring that municipal markets and other facilities operated by the City Council are sanitized on a regular basis and providing sanitizing supplies for the staff and customers of these facilities. The AFC applauds the efforts of the City Council under the stewardship of Mayor Narain to keep residents of the city safe and also to keep safe the thousands of visitors who conduct business in the city or visit for pleasure. The party recalls the cordial relationship that existed between the City Council and the coalition government that led to the close collaboration on many projects that resulted in improvements to the city and its maintenance. It should be recalled that immediately after assuming office in 2015, the coalition government partnered with the City Council to clear outfall challenges and drainage canals. This provided relief from flooding that was being experienced in many wards of the city. And as a result, December 2015 ended up being probably the cleanest shopping environment in over 2 decades. The AFC is aware that the mayor has approached central government for financial assistance to aid the council in carrying out its mandate. To date, such assistance has not been provided. Excuses that there must be an audit if the council before the council can collect any funds is just that, an excuse. We wish to remind the PPP that Georgetown is the seat of government. It is home to the diplomatic community, Guyana's busiest commercial districts, and is the center from which most business is conducted. The PPP has habitually sought to stifle the mayor and city council by withholding of support. The AFC notes that they are now joined by some unconscionable business owners who are refusing to do the right thing and pay their taxes. This is wrong. The AFC calls on central government to end this vendetta of non-support to the mayor and city council and for businesses to honor their financial obligations to the council. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kathy Kamraj. I now open for questions, and I see Nazima, please state your name and the usual protocols observed.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. I can.
Okay, Ragabir Prime News. I have a mix of questions, both on the statement and since I have the opportunity now to get in my other questions, could you just elaborate on what legal actions are possible as it relates to the Region 8 RDC, and how soon do you plan to pursue those? And the president yesterday was asked about the constitutional talks that are expected to take place and have not taken place. But hinged on those talks are the confirmation of the Chancellor and the Chief Justice. It doesn't seem that the talks are going to be possible soon, as the president has specific demands of the opposition leader. As a major party within the coalition, do you have a take on how this should happen, given that there seems to be a lag in these talks, and it don't seem that it's going to be happening anytime soon? And my final question, the government has said, the Attorney General in fact has said the de facto doctrine covers Minister Waldron Allicock and any decisions she would have taken within the period of controversy on her swearing in. But I've seen the coalition calling for her to return her salary, and also that these decisions and actions, including her parliamentary contributions, be null and void. Are you still going to hold on to that, given what the AG has said?
Thank you very much. So I'd ask Kamraj to, well, at least the first two, and then Kati or three, and then I can tackle well, all three. Legal action to compel the RDC to to hold the first meeting and the parliament. The president yesterday, the constitutional talks and demands before he can speak to the opposition leader, which is, and then the confirmation is the Chief Justice and Chancellor, and the question statement by Nandalal, which I think is the least that the doctrine of necessity applied will apply in the question of Waldron's membership to the Cameron.
Yeah, thank you very much, GS. On the very first one, the de facto doctrine, we wanted to make a distinction here because this was a very fraudulent thing done by the minister. And it was in what is called a most unappealing kind of manner, because she was well aware that she could not be a dual citizen to become a minister or a parliamentarian. And that is why the warnings had all been there, the law she knew, and so on. That is totally distinctly different from what we saw with other ministers that the Attorney General seems to want to mix up with. But it is totally distinguishable. And of course, the de facto doctrine operates when there is absolutely no law in relation to the matter. Here we have a law that says that you cannot be a minister and we were warning them, and they well knew the date. So when the matter went to court, obviously these things have a repercussions, and I am of the belief that Roysdale Ford is right when he made the argument that indeed salaries and the invalidation. Remember, in the last Esther Pereira case, we had to go to Parliament to validate all those laws that had occurred during the time the PPP, under that regime of illegal governance, in the sense of the ID card being illegal. We had to validate it by a validation act. So I don't understand what he's talking about, the doctrine of necessity. We still had to go and do a validation of all the acts because Ms. Claudette Singh had ruled that all those are illegal. So the AG still haven't gotten his head on properly up to now, because he was the one who was saying that she wasn't wrong in doing what she did, and the government was not wrong in appointing her and even making her a parliamentarian. So the de facto doctrine does not operate because we have gotten the precedent since the Esther Pereira case. You had to do a validation act immediately in Parliament. And I think that is probably what they'll have to do in relation to her. But there is also, as I mentioned in my statement, penalties to be paid. And the penalties should be paid by her, because this thing must not be allowed to be so prevalent now. People just go there and want to go and do a violation of the Constitution. We could understand the circumstances prior to that, but you do not use those circumstances to now apply to Ms. Waldron for the purposes of paying that penalty. In relation to the constitutional talks, I believe that, this was my personal opinion, that before the president should speak to Granger, Granger should ask him for his first degree, the certificate of where he got his first degree. But I understand the conditionality now might be that you have to appoint chancellor and a chief justice. Well, fine, I believe so too. And I believe that those who are acting in the positions are well qualified for those positions. Of course, that is also my personal opinion. There might be other lawyers who might have different opinions, but those are two quality ladies that are going to make Ghana proud in relation to its jurisprudence, and that they should be named. And it is a long time that we have not had substantive heads of the judiciary, namely the chancellor and the chief justice. I think I would want to say that I'm speaking on behalf of the Alliance for Change here, but at this point in time, now that the question has been asked, I would say that that is my personal opinion. We'll have to meet at a NEC to decide what that should be. In relation to the Region 8 RDC, our legal action could be a declaration that indeed the Speaker convene the Public Accounts Committee and convene all the other committees. The convening of these committees is a necessary adjunct of parliamentary democracy. And there was a previous case where Parliament was not convened in time and an action was filed for the Parliament to be convened. So we can file a similar action of similar ilk, whereby we can, or the court can order the Parliament to convene these. We believe that that could be done, and it will be a kind of a judicial review proceedings, because all statutory bodies or constitutional bodies are subject to judicial review of our court. And if our courts see that any statutory body or constitutional body is not performing their functions, the court can make a declaration. And once the declaration is made, one hopes that that could be done. But, you know, it does not need to go all that far. But what we have also in Region 8 now, believe it or not, and only this morning, I realized what is happening. The PPP has now spoken to Mr. Schuman to get rid of that one councillor called James. So they're trying to recall, his name is Brian James or some James, so that the 7 that the coalition got, councillors, and the 7 that the PPP got will now be supported by another person who will replace James, so that the PPP can get the chairmanship and the vice chairmanship. That is totally outrageous conduct on the part of the PPP. And the matter is now being handled because there were 2 times meetings were called up by that regional council for the chairmanship and the swearing in and the chairmanship and vice chair to be dealt with. One in the region itself, and then one on the 13th of November at the Arthur Chung Center. And because Mr. James held out that he's going to support the 7 coalition members, now Bharat Jagdev, I understand, spoke to the leader of the party, Schuman, to get rid of James and to put a PPP kind of an associate inside of that from his list, from Schuman's list, so that they could get it. The matter is right now, I understand, before the GCOM. They want to recall that person. I don't know how you could recall a regional councillor, his name having been named, and he also being gazetted as the regional councillor representing that Region 8.
Thank you very much, Kemraj. Ms. Day has asked a question, which you see. Why can you explain why the coalition did not submit a 2020 expense report? And with the representation of people that stating it's supposed to be done, when can we see one? Unfortunately, Ms. Day, I'm not in a position to say why the coalition has not submitted an election report, but I'm in a position to say that the Alliance for Change is a company, a corporation, and we have since 2015, 2005, since we were incorporated, issue our annual reports, financial audited reports, and they are with, I think the registrar is where it's listed, and in
Company
our
registrar.
course, pardon?
The company registrar.
Company registrar. So therefore, and obviously, our financial reports includes all our election expenses, etc., for every election that we would have contested, and our contribution, including 2015, and including our contribution to elections and so forth. So while I can't answer for the entire coalition, I think you can. But I know for our part, you can just go back to any one of our company reports, and you should see our financial statements. And we've been doing that since 2005, and we did it up to 2019. Obviously, 2020 will be done at the expiration of this year. Are there any other questions?
Yes, Mr. Patterson, Dennis Shabrow, WRR Waves News Talk Radio. Sir, could you say what steps had been taken, if any, by the coalition for the recouping of salaries and other emoluments from then ministers Felix and Scott, as a result of the court ruling that had found that they had not been in Parliament appointed as ministers properly. It's technocratic ministers.
I mean, obviously, somebody would have to bring an action. Somebody would, I would assume, would bring an action on that part. I don't think anyone brought an action on that part, but that doesn't alleviate the fact that we are going to proceed on this particular one. I don't know if anybody wants it. Or,
No,
I
go ahead,
think that
Kathy.
question should be posed to maybe the leader of the opposition, but as you say, anyone, any other party that has a grievance could have brought an action.
There is a question, why weren't the, Dennis, you finished?
No, I'd like to add something to that, please.
Yes, Raphael.
Thank you. Dennis, I think you're comparing oranges to grapefruit. Bear in mind that it was based on a court's ruling from the CCJ that this whole matter of dual citizenship was put to rest. Immediately thereafter, all those on the government side who were affected resigned. And so we all had to assert to GCOM for the 2020 elections and to our parties that none of us was a dual citizen. So you can't compare and ought not to compare the pre-2020 era with the post. And the article says anyone who has reason to believe and knowingly goes ahead is culpable. So once the CCJ ruled the matter, I believed and we believed that all parties respected that and therefore brought their houses in order. Recall that several members of the PPP themselves renounced their citizenship, Mr. Shearer being one, I believe Mr. Anamaya from Berbice himself. So you can't compare what happened with Greenwich and Harmon with what has happened now, because those matters arose out of the ruling of the CCJ. Thanks.
Thank you, Raphael. There's a question from Kimon King. Why wasn't, and this was either Raphael or Kemraj, why weren't the Chief Justice and Chancellor confirmed earlier? Did the AFC advocate for this at any point within the past few years? They're asking on the confirmation, the reason why the CJ and the Chancellor was not confirmed during the coalition period.
Well, I could answer that. Yes, indeed. I was asked by President Granger as to my thoughts at a private, well, he was opening it up for discussion. He had a certain approach as advised by then Attorney General Basil Williams. But I had my own, and my own was that we should appoint Chief Justice, Roxanne George as Chief Justice, and the Chancellor presently sitting, Cummings, as the Chancellor. And I have maintained that. I think I had made that public, and I will maintain that after today. They're the two most senior judges and the two, in my view, brightest judges that we have sitting in those respective positions, and they should be appointed. It has been too long that they have not been.
You should also inform that you knew at the time we needed the concurrence of the leader of the opposition. Raphael, if you want.
Right. It has to be remembered that this matter of confirmation is at least 2 decades old. After we passed the reforms in 2001, which required meaningful consultation, no side was able to convince the other since 2001 that their nominee or nominees should be appointed. And so the blame doesn't start with the David Granger administration. It preceded him and it continues until today. So the AFC, as Kemraj said, presented its position, and that was, we believe that both the Chancellor sitting now acting, Miss Yonit Cummings Edwards, and the current Chief Justice acting, Ms. Roxanne George Wiltshire, should be confirmed. That is a strong EFC position. Nonetheless, we should recall that we had acting positions from Carl Singh right through to Ian Chang. And this has been going on for too long and didn't just crop up a few years ago. Thank you.
Thank you. I see Adam Harris would like to speak, and then Raphael, there's a question by in the chat. Adam.
Good morning, sirs and madam. My question has to do with.
I'm hardly hearing Adam.
I'm hearing Adam.
Can you hear me better now, sir?
Yes.
Yes.
My question has to do, sir, with a statement made yesterday at the presentation of the Auditor General's report. The Auditor General reported that there was over expenditure of $75 million on the Liliendahl facility. Mr. Patterson, sir, as head of the, well, you're what? De facto head
Continue,
of
Adam.
the parliamentary committee responsible for. All right. Were you made aware of this? Have you seen the statement, the investigation report that alludes to this? And if that's the case, sir, would you be in a position to study it and make a report? The other question I wanted to ask had to do with the role and the behavior of the speaker. Seems to be quite willing to reject statements, motions, and the like coming from the opposition. Is there anything you can do to force a change in this behavior?
Right, I will attempt. First and foremost, thank you. Good question, Adam. I saw the statement by the Auditor General yesterday. Unfortunately, I have not been able to see the reports that has that from what you base the statement. And obviously, if there was a public accounts committee and it's made public, I would obviously sit and interrogate it. The whole committee will interrogate it. I can't really say much on how he arrived at that, but I would like to put on the record, from my knowledge, the procurement of the COVID hospital or whatever the term is now, was done in accordance with MPTAB regulations. So I know that for sure, because obviously, if you can recall, it took quite some time for MPTAB to approve the contracts for the works to go ahead. So I know that MPTAB as constituted in March, April, May, would have reviewed every single thing, including the Ministry of Finance, and then the contract was allowed to proceed. So it'll be interesting to see how the Auditor General arrives at this overpayment. And I can say this as I can say this now personally as a conservator by profession and somebody who was assisting the Auditor General's the PAC before. The Auditor General makes, when it comes to determining overpayments and it comes to determining, he makes some quantum leaps in assumptions. I've seen it, I've noted it. I think that most of the accounting agents very, very simple assumptions. And I give you an example which came out of the Durban Park report. There were 30 stands, they are 30 stands and to be constructed. And what the Ministry of Public Infrastructure did in that time is to go, because there's a limited time frame, to go out publicly or selected tenders to, I think, 10 contractors, to say that, to ask them, and all of them had the same bills of quantities, you know what I mean? And obviously, and ask them to submit prices. They did all of it, and the lowest 5 were submitted. The Auditor General made a statement saying that because, the lowest at that time was, I think, 70 million, the highest was 19, the spread between the 5. Because the lowest was 17, and the contract or anybody else other than the lawyers was overpaid by was an overpayment. He took no consideration whatsoever to say that it's time related. We have to finish within a particular time. There's a capacity related and those things like that. He just said that the contractor A bid $70 million. So therefore anybody paid more than $70 million in overpayment. So very, very loose. He took no idea that we tried to explain him. Contractor A, even though he bid $70 million, cannot finish the all the buildings, all the stands in the time frame. But that was his opinion, and obviously that was challenged at the PAC. And if he has anything that is erroneous, it will be challenged by the accounting officers when the PAC is convened. And the question of the speaker, I would ask Raphael if he could, as a former speaker, if he has some words on how we should be operating.
Well, thank you. What could be done? The speaker will have to be reminded on a daily and regular basis. And he has to know that he's part of a body of speakers or presiding officers like himself, particularly in the Commonwealth, that meets and subscribe to a standard. So I believe that the international parliamentary bodies will be brought and will continue to be brought up to notice, so to speak, of what is going on in Ghana. Because as David pointed out, Suriname, Jamaica, Trinidad, and St. Vincent have had recent elections, and all of their committees are working. And we, in fact, have been meeting in committee with the Parliamentary Management Committee meeting, and on a daily basis, indeed, we get invitations for different international fora. So there's no bar or hindrance to committees being met. So we will have to internationalize this issue.
Thank you, Raphael. There's a question from Ms. Wilberg directed to you. Have you seen it?
I think I just spotted it about the EITI.
Yes.
Let me say on record that the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative is one of our proud hallmarks of the AP and UFC government. When we came into office in 2015, Ghana had expressed its desire to embrace EITI. I can say that Cabinet considered this matter and decided we need to move from beyond talking. So by February of 2017, we had established the multi-stakeholder group and were well on our way. And we were able to produce our first report. We were able to attain membership, and we have published all of the oil contracts. Indeed, our frustration was with the mining contracts. What we discovered was that different parts of contracts are with different agencies. So GGMC would have the license, and we are told that the actual contract was negotiated by NISIL or Go Invest. So it was quite difficult and frustrating. But now that the PPP has control of those agencies again, we would expect that they will bring these contracts forward. We were unable to access as many of them as we would have wanted. We had written to all the companies asking them to share, but I believe the confusion which erupted after December of 2018 put paid to some of these initiatives. So now that, as I said, the PPP, who knows where the skeletons are buried, now has control of them again, we would expect that they will publish these. But we are very proud that we introduced the EITI to Guyana and that it was able to work without any frustrations. Thank you.
Thank you. There is a question on the recently saw from Starbuck News, which we saw the AFC submit an amendment to reduce the jail time for small amounts of marijuana. PPP has a track record of supporting opposition tabled bills and amendments. Why does the AFC believe that they will have the support now? And why is it tabled when you had the support? What it was so, David, it was tabled. It was tabled, as you probably know, by Michael Carrington, and it went through several reviews. I think that the one that we stated that we tabled was the final version and the final agreed position. As you know, that no, the Parliament did not meet for entire 2019, almost all of 2019. So I think that actually put paid to the successful passage after it was agreed. And it is note the cabinet of the former of our administration agreed and approved the amendment to go to as a bipartisan bill, not a private member's bill, to go to cabinet, to go to Parliament. But obviously, unfortunately, it did not meet. If the PPP supports this or not, we will be tabling it, and the PPP will have to defend their position as we will defend our position. There is a question from Mr. Andrew Weeks. I'm doing an recorder, and this is that in the press, GNNL, there's a plan to remove Yon Cummins and replace her with Dr. Judge Singh as Chancellor. Well, I don't know if anyone's aware of that, but I don't think that does anybody want to comment on that, the removal, the suspected removal of Mrs. Cummins, if they are aware of anything like that? I don't think so.
I am not aware of anything like that.
We're not aware of
Where
that.
is that coming from?
Who's
the reporter?
The state is GN, one of the Ghana News Network, one of those online things. But we are unaware of that, Mr. Weeks. So we obviously wouldn't comment on that. There is one here. I'll ask that one, Mr. Weeks. Mr. Granger, Conrad, moments ago, Mr. Granger stated, former President Granger stated he will not meet with the other presidents because there's no proper agenda, etc. This is a signal that Mr. Granger may attend if his concerns or observations are met. Will your party agree with such a move? Cameron, do you want to take that?
Well, the invitation was to former President Granger. And if he would like certain preconditions, as we would like certain preconditions, one of which is show me your first degree certificate. And that is not being, farcical or in any way a joke or so. It is a serious matter. And also enjoin in the confirmation of the Chief Justice and the Chancellor as they are presently in acting positions, that those are conditionalities that I would like to see made before. And I'm certain that the former president will have his conditionalities. And let us see if the president, Irfan Ali, can meet them. I can't say how the president will be thinking, but I would hope that he thinks preconditionalities to the meeting.
Thank you, Mrs.
I'd like to add something to that, please.
Yes, Rafa.
In fact, I've just completed a bit of a lengthy note on this whole issue of dialogue. And I wouldn't get into the conditionalities right now. In fact, in my view, in the past, we have met. So it is important that the leaders of Guyana meet, but more importantly would be indeed the agenda and why are they meeting. If it is for photo op, no. If it is for meaningful discussions on national issues, yes. So later today, I'll be sending a letter to the press on this matter. Thanks.
Very, very good, Mr. Chabral, and then we'd answer the question from King.
Yes, I would like to know whether the Alliance for Change subscribes to the views by Mr. Imran Khan about the fact that Mr. Walter Lawrence was excluded as a member of Parliament. And if you do not subscribe to the view, what then is your overall view about the fact that Ms. Lawrence, a key member in the executive of the major coalition partner, has been excluded?
Dennis, I can say this unequivocally that APNU is a constituent collection of 5 different parties. The Alliance for Change is a separate individual party. I mean, they have their entire their selection process, which they went through, which we respected. If you can recall, when the Alliance for Change decided that we are going to name our MPs, we made a stated how we are going to do it. We set out that we will name our MPs without interference from any other political organization, and which we did. We had our national executive, and we actually voted. The members of parliament were thereafter voted 2 rounds of voting, and the top, with the conditions, and the top 9 were selected. The APNU has their own procedures and those things like that, you know, I mean, and obviously, and as a partner, I don't think it's for us to comment on their selection process. Everyone is self-governing. That has been the way for all the while within the coalition.
So you essentially are distancing yourself from Mr. Khan's position.
Yeah,
Let me just,
I'm telling you how the Alliance for Change
did ours.
respects everyone's process, electoral process. Just like how we've asked and we've received respect for our electoral process and our selection process. And that's how we...
So then was Mr. Khan out of place?
No,
Listen, I would like to make this statement. Mr. Khan, in accordance with the very liberal democratic attitude that the Alliance for Change has given his statement. That is not the statement of the Alliance for Change, and the Alliance for Change, if anybody feels so, would like to disassociate from that. But he has made his statement, and a lot of statements are made by many members of the AFC, which sometimes are not in accordance with the official formal position of the Alliance for Change. And that is the statement on that matter.
Thank you. There is one from, again, Mr. Patterson, the PPP has canceled a few contracts for the construction of schools. Do you think the AP and UAFC should have done more aggressively, dealt more aggressively in any way with the contractors who take taxpayers' dollars for infrastructure projects and skirt their contractual obligations? What are your views on the handling of the school contracts by BK and Co? And this one is directed to me. First, let me say this. One, we took as a coalition, I can say that, we took absolute care and absolute responsibility. Anybody that was found wanted, skirting their contractual obligations, were brought to book. With the question on the schools are twofold. You're asking what are my opinions on the twofold. St. Rose's High School, I know, and Kathy's old president of the parent teacher, that the St. Rose's contract was awarded. The contract was awarded, and after that, while they did the demolition and those things like that, there was an issue now with the foundations and the type of foundations that have been done, and there was two different opinions between, or 2 or 3 different opinions on what to do. One, if it should be piled, or if we should do, slab foundations and those things. And that was the delay, because obviously we wanted to have the best possible. And that particular for Courtney, because of the mere fact that of that particular, that is what led to us establishing the inspectorate or division within the Ministry of Public Infrastructure. You note how we hired 40 new engineers about in mid-2019. That case, the St. Rose's School, one of the backbones behind it, because what we found was that without that, there was no, on behalf of the government, there was no technical group who could make the decisions. The consultants on one hand recommended that they would like to have piles. The contract did not call for piles, and then therefore what we had obviously is that the permanent secretary and her staff were the ones who were forced to try and to make the technical decisions, and that is why we established the inspectorate division. And the inspectorate decision, they reviewed St. Rose's. This is just in 2019, end of 2019, when it was set up. And they reviewed the contract and they made a recommendation going forward. So that was the delay. The delay was not the contractor's side. Because the contractor, and I'm not speaking on behalf of him, as I can recall when the question came, the contractor said he will go with whatever direction the government recommends. However, he wants to be clear, though, if it fails, it was the response, not his responsibility. That's why we took the thing. In the question of the Yara Cabra School, I know that this was, and you have to remember, this was in the 2019 budget. In the 2019 budget, the school. The problem is, and once again, that's why we put in place the special services inspector decision, is that what we found is that within the ministries, particularly, and not within the Ministry of Education, the engineers within our ministry were not, I say they're green, as you would say, they were not very experienced. So it took them quite a while to try, and even though the money was there, it took them quite a while to prepare the contract, not the tender documents. And that's why we were told it was late. Once again, when in August last year, when the inspectorate decision group was put in place, they assisted in helping getting the procurement done. It was done late because, of course, for the first half of the year, first 3/4 of the year, it was done in-house at the Ministry of Education. And of course, I said engineers there were a bit lean. We lent them, my ministry lent the Ministry of Education architects when we realized the problems they had. We lent them public architect and technical person. So the award was done late, hence, and then obviously, and that is the problem that I know of with the Yara Cabra School. But I would like to say this on behalf of the community, Yara Cabra, Circuit City, and the other areas around there, that the school is very much needed. The secondary school is very much needed. If the government, and it's in their right, have a problem with BK or whatever contractor, that should not delay the construction of this school. I mean, they have a primary school after many years, it was put up by our administration. The secondary school is needed. Myself and Kathy was up there about 2 Sundays ago or 1 Sunday ago, and we heard about the costs involved in trying to send students on the highway to secondary school, the amount of money. So this area, large catchment, we reckon over 300 and something students already are desperately in need of the school in Yara Cabra.
David, can I just add a point to the St. Rose's situation? I think the challenge is, and I'm noticing just based on how the question is asked, is that sometimes we make assumptions. For example, the contractor taking taxpayers' money and not doing the job. And this is where it's so important to make sure that we are able to have all the facts and can provide an objective analysis of the challenge. So added to Mr. Patterson's explanation, I want to add the financial component, because as you said, I was a member of, actually still am a member of the board of St. Rose's and the previous chair. And the reality is that that school is more than 150 years old, a huge old wooden building. And so it was only when the building was absolutely demolished that the contractors could see the level of foundation that had been put there close to 200 years previous. And therefore, in today's world, when you needed to construct a proper concrete building to ensure the livelihood and to get value for money, there then became the issue of the structure and what the foundation would require. And that is where, in addition to the points that Mr. Patterson made, the requirements of the building demanded an additional, I think it was more than $60 million or something like that. And it then meant that we had to get additional funds to add to the funds that had been approved by tender board. And during that time also, we had the no confidence motion with a lot of discussion on what could be spent, what could not be spent, and projects. And therefore, I just want to say that we need to take a little more care to make sure that all of the information is there when we make the statements, because it's not as simple an issue. It's far more complex than one that is being reported.
Thank you very much, Kathy. Yes, sorry, Ms. Wilbur, you said I missed the question there. Obviously, you did. Ms. Wilbur, I believe oil is expected to account for 40% of the economy. What particular issues do you intend to hold the government accountable as regards to this critical sector? That's directed to me. First and foremost, obviously, we would like the audits of the expenses, obviously, and the audits for what can and cannot be claimed as cost recovery. Obviously, that has to be done. I was heartened to see that the GRS has set out that they're continuing to increase their capacity to do that. But obviously, wherever there are shortfalls, I would hope that the government will use international best practices and independent persons unrelated to the oil and gas industry, uninfluenced, to help GRA in their cost recovery. The management of the sovereign wealth fund, obviously that's an issue for everybody to be concerned. There's a bill in Parliament. The PPP has said it's out that they're uncomfortable with it, but we have not seen or heard any of the issues with which they are uncomfortable. We as the opposition will pay keen attention, as I'm sure you will, the Fortes State, on what the PPP intends to do with the sovereign wealth fund. As you know, as it is now, there are limits to how monies can be expended or withdrawn from it. We do feel that the PPP would like to remove these limits and this oversight and to allow them to dip into this fund as though they like they would have done previously in the consolidated fund. So obviously that's an area of concern that we will keep paying a keen eye to. Local content, obviously I've seen the local content report was handed over. We expressed our disappointment before that we were not even consulted or even given an opportunity to make our input in a local content report. So I assume it's just a draft and it'll be circulated for public consumption. And at that point, we will make our input in either via the media or in Parliament. And the environmental issues, as you know, once again, we have been on record about the issues and the challenges of that can affect a country like Guyana, which in most parts is in pristine condition when it comes to our environment. I mean, we have no major, as of yet, polluting issues other than in the mining sector, which we've been addressing, but that's not, and that can be done. I know Natural Resources has a regeneration fund, and under former Minister Trotman, that was being done. We will be looking at the environmental issues with a keen eye. We've already stated our reservations on the whole question of flaring, the whole question of village, wastewater dumping, and the entire environmental issues for the entire oil spills. We've already on record on that. And then, of course, in the end, technology transfer, which is linked to local content. But we would like to have a program. We would sure we'd have a program whereby in the shortest possible time that it should be this industry, by the most parts, should be run by Guyanese persons, Guyanese citizens, and if not Guyanese citizens, CARICOM citizens. Those are the areas in which I will be looking at. We have quite a lot of questions here. So Raphael, there's a question in on Petrobras. And then a follow-up question, and then Mr. Cheval. Raphael, you seen the question on Petrobras?
No, I haven't seen it.
Mr. Patterson, Mr. Trotman, the CEO of Petrobras, has said that Guyana has invited the company to participate in our licensing rounds. According to the business information analysis first, standards and pool global. But the government has said nothing about licensing new oil blocks. Does this concern you, given that the red flags stood out the giveaways of the Kanji and Kaichur blocks by the PPP just before the 2015 election?
I start out by saying that we should be concerned indeed about any company being given, any new company being given access to the offshore blocks. Where Petrobras is concerned, it should be recalled that in 2018,
Correct.
Yourself, David, myself, Foreign Minister Greenwich, and the President, we accompanied the President, in fact, to Brasilia. Talks were held with agencies, ministries, including Petrobras. So this is nothing new. Brazil is seen as a countervailing force against our neighbor to the west. And there has always been interest in Brazil being more involved in Guyana's development. The road to Brazil from Linden to Lethem, the bridge, the possibility of a deep water harbor, agriculture, and the possibility of mining and petroleum development. So this is not new. You would expect that rules and parameters would be set and that there would not be anything that would cause us any grave difficulty. But it's not new. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you, Rafael. Once again, I'd like to echo your concerns on the tendering or the awarding of blocks, oil block. We are on record, I think, the Alliance for Change, as well as the coalition, as well as the civil society, in saying it all, that not only do we have to ensure any blocks that are given out are done in an open and transparent manner, and in full transparency. We are unaware. I am unaware of any new rounds of awards for blocks, but obviously there's something I can undertake to look into. Dennis Rabal, and then there's a follow-up question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Patterson. My hand was inadvertently raised, my virtual hand.
Right. Then my final question I see here is a follow-up for Rafael. Can you expect that the AFC, this is from Ms. Wilberg, can you expect the AFC to press the government to list the beneficial owners of oil blocks and some of the mining concessionaires before year end? That will be keeping with the latest EITI requirements.
Well, I can say that once we sign on to EITI, this is inevitable. It may be delayed, it may be frustrated, but we knew that this was the course, the path that we had put the country on. So I don't know whether it will be done by year end. I can say that just prior to leaving office in July, I had reason to write to the EITI Secretariat in Oslo, Norway, asking for some more time to prepare the second report because of COVID, etc. Other countries had done so. It wasn't just Guyana. And there was an affirmative response from Norway, given the prevailing circumstances. So I'm not sure what has happened since. Not much has been said. Interestingly, the director was quite vocal when I was minister, Dr. Jadupat, but all of a sudden I don't hear much, if anything at all, from him. It just goes to what Kemraj, the leader, spoke of earlier. We have a more liberal approach where we encourage people to speak. But we have not been hearing anything at all about the ITI since August. I think there was a passing reference. So it is inevitable that Guyana must make disclosures, and we expect those to be done as quickly as possible. Thanks.
Thank you, folks. I close the button. I think we could come to an end. In closing,
Mr. Chair, could I make a quick comment before you wrap up? Sherry Duncan at this end, AFC executive. Just to underscore your point raised earlier, Mr. Chairman, on the need for the committees to meet. The PPP had promised through Teixeira and Anil Nandalal a very robust legislative agenda which we don't see currently. And we have written to the media on this matter. As a matter of fact, they had promised to table the law reform commission bill, the small business bill, the bail bill, the hire purchase bill, an amendment to the Insurance Act, the National Resources Commission bill, a revised Petroleum Commission bill, a solid waste management bill, the revising of 3 pieces of legislation, in particular, the crime bill, the anti-terrorism bill, and the State Assets Recovery Act. We are eager to get to the business of the people, just as the PPP, and want to underscore that we have our own legislative agenda that we are working with. And just yesterday, one of the bills we will have submitted to Parliament is the revision of this anti-narcotics, the Narcotic Act, that we believe is going to play a major role in righting a lot of wrongs. That is in particular the Narcotics, Drugs, and Psychotropic Substances Control Amendment Bill of 2020. And so we are eager to return to the parliamentary chambers to get on with the business of the people and not just only talk the talk, but walk the walk. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Sherrod. In closing, folks, I note this evening that there will be the inaugural flight of JetBlue to Guyana. I have no doubt that you will see a plethora of PPP ministers dressed and decked in their red and their blue, and they will be claiming that it's a confidence in their government, and they'll be claiming, as they've been doing so often, they'll be claiming ownership of several of the things. Almost all of the things that they're doing stems from the coalition government. It should be recalled that JetBlue was supposed to have started on April the 5th of this year, but because of the COVID restrictions, COVID pandemic, they put off their arrival until, of course, this evening. And the reason we were able to get JetBlue in the country, obviously, took 3 or 4 years of really hard negotiation between us. I also noted that the minister, the 2 ministers, the minister and his mini-me has announced that they have discussions with Virgin Atlantic. And I've said this before, that we were up to the end of just about the beginning of 2019. As you could know, there's a famous statement which I made that Virgin Atlantic wanted to come to Guyana, and they actually did make a proposal for us, and I can say this on the record. And the proposal was that they wanted to fly to Guyana, and in order to fly to Guyana, they said that it was the passenger load after our study. It just resulted in about no more than 100 passengers per day, or per week, sorry, 100 passengers coming in from to Guyana from the UK. It's 100 was a number. I'm not sure if not per day. I think it's per week. And they said that was not economically viable. They asked the government of Guyana and myself and the Minister Winston Jordan that we would provide them a subsidy of $3.1 million US per year for 3 years for them to come to Guyana. We, of course, declined because we thought that Guyana was an emerging market and that market forces should prevail, that we don't offer financial subsidies. No other airline, and if we start up advertising. So when I like the state media to find out, when you hear that their Virgin Atlantic is coming, that was only last year, now we have that in black and white. If Virgin Atlantic and these airlines that they're coming, if the government will be offering them financial subsidies for them to come, and if they are, will they be offering other airlines? And secondly, on what basis have they determined to offer financial subsidies to these airlines? So just saying that we're pleased for the airlift and the attention that Guyana is now getting and receiving. However, several of the airlines and when we demitted office, all of these were trained and signed already on the dotted lines. United, excuse me, my apologies. United was in discussions with the industry as well, with DAA as well, for routes out of Houston and purely, primarily for the oil and gas sector. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very, very much for joining us. Kathy will circulate the statements, and if anybody has any follow-up questions, you can direct them to her and she will channel it to us. So thank you for being with us this morning, and see you later.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.